Thank you all for tuning in. The following is a presentation of Bald Spots Productions. Be sure to like, comment, and share. Subscribe, follow, whatever it is you've got to do to kick that algorithm into gear and help us reach more people. Yes, it is I, your humble host, Bill Hatch III, coming to you live from the Palatial Home Studios of Bald Spots Productions here in the beautiful city of Malden, Missouri. Joining me from more than acceptable safe social distances are my guests for today. Corey, is it Poirier?
Yeah, it's as good as I can do.
That's as good as you. Well, if that's as good as you can do, I can't be expected to do any better. And Michael Kollwitz. How about that one? Did I get that okay?
You did perfect. Thanks.
All right.
It's been murdered.
Yeah, I had a gentleman of Scottish descent on a networking group I was on last night, and he said his last name had only been pronounced correctly twice in his entire life, and I think they were both parents. But I still haven't figured out how to say it yet. But I have a meeting with him tomorrow. Maybe I'll figure it out by then. Well, I always start with the same question of my guests. And that is, who are you reading right now? And I'll go ahead and start with Michael. Who or what are you reading?
I'm reading this book by Chris Anderson on
TED
how
Talks.
to give a TED Talk, which is something I'd like to do. And
Sweet.
I understand, Corey, you've done it several times.
I have.
And
Indeed, I have.
I'm almost to the end here. Let's see. Yep, there we go. A few more pages, and I should be an expert.
After a few more pages and probably a few TED Talks. I mean, shoot, I've done more than 100 episodes of this show, and I'm still not an expert in how to do a podcast. So maybe I should read somebody else's book on it. So, what are you getting out of the book on TED Talks?
Oh, God, a lot. This is the guy that took over TED Talks. And
Okay.
he's seen thousands of them, and every mistake you could possibly make and every good thing you could possibly do, not to mention all the different ways you could give a TED Talk. And it's been invaluable, and it's a New York Times bestseller, the official TED Guide to Public Speaking.
Okay, nice. I've had a few people who've given TED Talks on the show. A couple of them have been sent to me by Corey. Yep, thank you. And they've been some great guests. So tell me, Corey, who are you reading right now?
If you guys are familiar with Jack Canfield,
Mm-hmm.
He's the co-creator of Chicken Soup for the Soul, and
Right.
This was kind of his, I don't know what you call it, perennial book. It's called The Success Principles, but it basically was his biggest solo book outside of the Chicken Soup sort of atmosphere or sphere. And yeah, it's basically 64 principles to live your life by.
Nice.
I said to him in an interview years ago, it's a lot. He's trying to remember 64 principles. I actually asked him to distill it down to the most important one. And at the time, I don't think he was a big fan of trying to bring it down to one, because he said, you have to do all 64. And I said, yeah, but if I'm going to share this with people, I can't share 64. So I got him down to one. But it's a book that I feel like he took what he learned throughout his whole career and what he learned studying with the masters and put it into what are the principles that we can live our life by, basically. It's like a Bible for success.
Nice. Yeah, I'm working on writing a book series on leadership, and after I got all the organization stuff done, I realized it was going to be somewhere in the 2,000 to 2,500 page range for the entire series. Now by book, it's okay because it's like going to be like 200 to 250 pages per book, so that's doable. That's not entirely unreasonable. So I'm going to try to make the first book be kind of like an introduction to the entire series, so that if you really didn't want to read the rest of it, you could not and still get the gist of it. But if you find out that you need to know more about something, then you could always go back and buy the book on that particular subject.
I love it.
But so great. So yeah, it's great to finally have you on, Corey. I've heard much about you, and like I said, I've had some of your referrals on as guests, and which I totally appreciate. And but yeah, so you are an author and TEDx speaker, and your book is the wait a minute, shoot, I wrote it down. The something passenger, the enlightened passenger,
Correct. Yeah.
and yeah, and saw that over on the thisisthebook.com, where people can find it. And actually, it's funny, the where you put your name in for the for Riverside actually only shows up for us. So we each know each other's names, so it doesn't actually show up in the video for the.
I wasn't
But
sure.
I've had some people put some very, yeah. But don't worry, I'll put the link will be in the description so people can find the book. So tell me a little bit about the book.
Well, as you said, it's called The Enlightened Passenger. It's a fictional parable. So if you're familiar with the books, like, for example, The Alchemist or Celestine Prophecy or The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari or The Richest Man in Babylon, it's that style of book.
Okay.
Or Augmendino, his writing as well.
Yeah.
And so it's a fictional book that's loosely based on my life. Interestingly, most of those books I just mentioned are loosely based on the author's life in some way. And so it's almost like a Hollywoodized version of my life. But basically, it's two strangers sitting together on a plane. One stranger pays for the seat next to him so he doesn't have to sit next to anybody. He's a young business guy, doesn't really like spending a lot of time with people. He falls asleep. He wakes up to an older guy smiling, sitting beside him. And the older guy's kind of the wiser of the two. And ultimately, the flight, which is called The Flight That Changes Everything, the flight involves the older guy kind of schooling the younger guy in what it takes to become a rich person. Not rich financially, but the reason the young guy actually listens to him is because he wants to become rich financially, and he thinks the older guy has done that. But basically, it turns into the elder guy revealing 10 life lessons based on what he's learned on his journey. And so the story ends up becoming really, we follow the journey of the older guy while we're also learning like the younger guy. And so people will say to me, like, who's the enlightened passenger? And I said, you tell me, because it was actually designed that way to be, it could be the older guy who's more enlightened, but it could be the younger guy who's becoming more enlightened, or it could be you, the reader, because you're still a passenger as well, who's learning and becoming more enlightened by reading it. And so it was meant to be ambiguous as to who the actual enlightened passenger is. But that, in a nutshell, is the book. It's a fictional parable with 10 life lessons that took me 7,500 interviews over the years to actually learn. And it's what I would teach my kids if I could only teach them.
Froze.
Oh, am I back now?
You're back.
Okay. I don't know where
you froze for a second.
Yeah, I think I've just finished off at the last second, but yeah.
10 life lessons.
Yeah, so what I was saying was they're the 10 life lessons I would teach my kids if I only had 24 hours left to teach them things, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's you talked about getting it all 64 of the chicken soup principles down to one, and trying to get 10 life lessons down into one day. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's not an easy task. I think the hardest part was deciding on the exact 10, because when you do that many interviews, there's way more than 10 possible options. And even 10, to be honest, in the world we're in today, seemed like a lot, because we're in that such a everything shorter, everything smaller. Like even podcasts now, we're seeing a lot of them go to like 5 minutes and 10 minutes. I don't know what you can get. I did a 5-minute TED talk, and that's hard to get something out in 5 minutes. But what I felt here with the 10 is I felt that they won't all resonate with everybody. So my thinking was, you might read the 10, but you might only use 3 of them. So the reason I put 10 is I figured I'm not expecting you to remember all 10 of them. It's just that way there's a better chance you'll find 2 or 3 that make sense to you, or you don't, or that you're learning for the first time. Versus if I just put 3 and you've already heard those 3, you're going to be like, I don't even need to read the book anymore. So that was my reasoning with the 10.
Okay.
But it's a
Well,
pocket book. 100 pages.
I do like the enlightenment, no waiting concept.
Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds like a great book.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, it does.
Actually, I saw it mentioned online just a few days ago, and the title caught my attention immediately, and I had no idea I was going to be here with the author of it. So congratulations! That's quite an accomplishment.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael. I so appreciate it. It's a labor
Writing
of
a
love.
book is not easy.
No, I was just literally saying it's a labor of love, and also underline the word labor, because there is work involved. I mean, even if like this one was the most seamless book I've ever written, meaning it all kind of flowed, and even with a book that flowed, writing it was still a work. It was still, and it's a short book. It's a pocket book. Even with all that, it was still work. Like, I still can tell you, it takes time to write a book and then edit it, and then make sure you're putting out a book that doesn't feel like it was written by AI in 20 minutes. To actually write a book that can maybe stand the test of time takes time. But I will say, I always say to people, now that the book's written, the work begins. Because what's harder than writing a book is marketing a book.
That I can totally believe that.
I agree.
Yeah, I think people think books sell themselves, and there gets to be a point, I feel like, for the ones that have created these massive books, like The Alchemist, which I mentioned earlier. I mean, it's got like 30,000 reviews on Amazon. It sold 300 million copies.
Whoa.
Guaranteed, every year that book's still selling thousands of copies, just based on the nature of the name and people saying, you got to check out this book. So those books sell themselves, but people didn't see the boulder he pushed up the hill to get it to the point where the boulder came down easily. I think books do sell themselves at a certain point, like Harry Potter. Those books sold themselves at a certain point. But what I'm getting at is to get them to the masses and get people to buy into them and read them and stuff. That part doesn't sell itself.
Yeah, it's kind of like the musicians who become 20-year-long overnight successes.
Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah,
and it's hard to get people to. It's hard to get people to actually sit down and read anything anymore.
It so is. Somebody said the other day, she sells programs, and she said, a lot of days I feel like it's easier to sell a $20,000 program than to sell a $20 book.
And
there might
be the case.
I can see that. Actually, I could see that it wouldn't be that difficult in some senses to sell the $20 book as much as it would be to get somebody to read the $20 book.
Touche. Yeah, I mean, how many books do we have? Like, I have a shelf beside me. How many of us buy books and either buy too many because we love books and then never get time to read them all, or buy them with great intentions and just never get time to read them all, or
guilty as charged.
Yeah, I've been that my whole life. I've read more than most, but at the same time, I bet you I have more.
You can see behind me on my bookshelves the remains of my book collection. I got rid of a bunch of them before we moved out here to Missouri, and because I didn't want to get a bigger truck.
I love it. That's amazing.
But, yeah, and that's not counting the electronic books that I have as well. Jeff Bezos has a pretty decent chunk of my change.
He's got a bit of mine too. That's for sure.
Yep.
Awesome.
And speaking of musicians, Michael, you play an instrument called the Chapman stick.
I do. And
now that is one, until I saw your email about possibly coming on the show, that I had never heard of before.
Well, that's the case with most people. This instrument is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. It's an American stringed instrument, and it just never really caught on in a big way. It was invented by Emmett Chapman in Los Angeles in the mid-'70s, and Emmett was this incredible genius, an inventor, So he didn't think like normal people did, and he was a jazz guitarist on the LA circuit in the late 60s, and he wanted to play all the parts at once and be Jimi Hendrix at the same time. And so the way he did that was he invented a way to play his guitar using both hands. And this is back in the late 60s, way before Van Halen or anyone else was tapping. But it still didn't give him
Right.
the range and the playability that he wanted. So he literally invented an instrument to do just that and only that.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I guess if nothing's doing what you want, invent it.
And the way
Kind of the
he did
American way
it,
of things, isn't it?
it is. It's designed to you just lightly tap. So you don't have to pick it, pluck it, strum it, bow it. Usually on stringed instruments, one hand finds the note or vibrating length, and the other hand creates the sound energy by striking it. On his instrument, one tap of your finger does both jobs. So you can play full chords in both hands, like a pianist, but directly on
Oh,
strings.
wow.
It's kind of like if the guitar and the piano got together and had a baby. So it gives you the expressive qualities of guitars or violins, and it also gives you the polychordal capabilities like a piano, and it also will play in the bass register as well. And it's percussive, so you can even play drums on it just by lightly tapping it.
Wow. We'll have to get you to play a little bit for us here before too much longer. Um, but now, Corey, you help people make an impact. Is that did I catch that right, or was that somebody else? I've got too many people coming on the show, and I know that was something Michael was interested in
So
when I mentioned it to him that you were going to be on the show.
So I missed just a little portion of that, Bill, because I don't know
Oh,
if it's thundering. It just started thundering and stuff here, so I don't know if that's affecting the internet. But I
oh
heard
no.
impact, and then I heard that's what Michael's interested in, but I missed the part in the middle, which is probably the most important part. So I just need,
Probably that you've worked with others before to help them make an impact in as a part of their lives.
yeah, absolutely. So backstory, origin story, as they say in the superhero world, is I've been a speaker writer for years, and what happened was people used to come to me and ask me how I did it. So people would say, I see you're booked all the time. I see you're getting paid to speak. How did you do it? Then people said, I see you've done at this point 5, but at the time it was 3 TED talks. How did you do it? And so
Maybe
I kept
the
having people.
oh,
Oh,
there we go.
still there? Okay. Yeah. So basically,
I
people were
think
asking me
I think the thunder is hurting us.
yeah, I don't. I might be able to switch to a different network in a sec here, because I have multiple
Okay.
networks here. But yeah, so I was just
Oh,
saying
cool.
that I was getting people asking me all the time how I got paid to speak, how I got speaking so often, how I landed 3 TED talks at the time. It's 5 now, but how I did that. And so ultimately, I realized that I'd love to be able to start helping other people create an impact beyond what I was doing one on one. And so I started saying, you know what, maybe it's time I start helping other people find those opportunities. And I kind of jokingly said I used to be the surfer that was doing the stuff, like just me alone on the surfboard with the attention. And then I decided I want to be the person creating the waves for other surfers. So that was the change I made.
Yep, I think you might have to change networks.
Okay, I'm going to give that a go. But hopefully you caught the last thing of what I
Okay.
just said.
Nope.
Okay, awesome.
You were the surfer, and
Yeah, and I just try. And now I'm trying to create the waves for other surfers. So basically, I'm trying
okay,
to create the impact for other speakers now. I'm going to
very
switch, so I
cool.
might pause for a sec, but I'll be right back.
Okay. Yes, and Michael, I liked the pun you put in your enrollment form. Uh, Stick with it. I thought that was funny.
Oh, thanks. I
Yes, I am a bit of a pun person myself.
Well, I got to ask a question. Why only one L, Bill?
Why not?
Oh, okay.
I'm actually Bill the Third. My full name's William. William Arthur Hatch the Third. Pinkies out, everyone. But and both my father and my grandfather. Well, my grandfather doesn't anymore because he passed away a few years back. But we all went by Bill. And when the texting era began, I thought, well, we're typing to each other so much, I'll just spell it with one L. And why not?
Hey, okay. Hey,
So,
thanks for answering that. It could be three L's too, because you're the third, right?
It could be. It could be.
So it was with two L's originally, though.
It was originally with two L's, yes.
Very
For a little while, I was Billy when I was a little kid, but I decided that was not what I wanted to be as an adult.
Makes sense. And I seem to be back now. I
Yes.
switched over to a stronger network, I think.
Sweet.
Yeah, we have like 5 networks here, and anyway, yeah. So it's usually helps, but yeah, I don't know what's going on today. Weather.
Yeah, it's off all over the place.
So hopefully I finished answering the question though that you did ask, Bill. But basically,
Yeah.
we try to help impact people by getting them on stages, getting them on media, that type of thing.
Okay. Very cool. And Michael, what is it you hope to do to make your impact?
Well, after all these years of playing the stick, still nobody seems to know about it. And I'm trying to mix speaking with music and humor to make it more interesting. And at the same time, introduce people to the instrument. Last year, I published a book which is titled Stick With It. And it's basically a memoir, but I was one of the very first students of this instrument. Starting at 19 years old, I saw Emmett Chapman play at a college coffee house in Southern California. I had played the trumpet in school band for 10 years, but the moment I saw Emmett, I was hooked for life. I bought one of his first instruments and became one of his first students. At that time, I lived in Riverside, California, and he lived at the top of Laurel Canyon. Yeah, he lived at the top of Laurel Canyon. So I would drive in
where that is.
every month or two. It was an all-day deal, and I took lessons with Emmett for over 10 years. We became friends, and I almost felt like I was kind of part of the family. So I was there in the beginning, and I saw all these things. I wanted to document it because there were so few people there in the beginning. There's only about a little over 8,000 of these instruments in existence. And there's probably a couple thousand people around the world playing them. But of course, it's a different instrument and a different technique. So I would imagine a few instruments end up in closets, under beds, in attics. You get it when you're all excited in the beginning and go, yeah, maybe after the next tour or something. So I kind of wanted to document the history because there's just some pretty amazing people in the beginning, and I had a lot of amazing experiences, all thanks to Emmett Chapman, the inventor of the stick.
Wow.
Oh, and here.
That's pretty cool. Oh, yes.
Stick with it.
Stick with it. And I'll put the link to your book in the description as well, so people can find that.
Thank you very much. It's also really available as an audio book, because I found out
cool,
not many people read anymore, so I recorded the whole thing.
Yeah, I would think a lot of people interested in music would probably be more apt to listen to a book as well, just because that seems to be how many musicians I've known over the years have learned, tended to learn by audio. And not to say they can't read. Don't go complaining. Although I wouldn't mind the comments, but.
Well, earlier in life, I had a career for almost 20 years in the two-way radio business. I sold and distributed commercial equipment Because one of the things I found out in my early 20s is I couldn't make a dime playing an instrument no one had ever even heard of. So I had to, support my family. And my
Mhm.
sales trainer at the time said, turn your car into a classroom. So, I was listening to tapes all the time. Jim Rohn, Tom Hopkins, Tony Robbins, all those kind of people. And it's kind of nice because when you're, going on a ride, now these audio books, you can learn something or be entertained.
Mhm. Or some combination of both.
Of both, right.
But hey, let's get a little sample of the Chapman stick
Absolutely.
since we're talking about it.
Sure. I hope you can see it.
Yeah. Very cool. I
Does it
like it.
sound all right?
Yeah, it sounded okay.
Hey.
Yeah, it should the quality should be fine on the final draft.
Okay, great.
But yeah, so you get to
You
go
want
out and play much?
excuse me. Not as much as I used to. I live in Sedona, Arizona. I've mostly been playing at fancy hotels. But I for many
Okay.
years, I did the festival and fair circuit, and every weekend we were somewhere else. For 6 years, I lived in Lahaina on Maui, and I
Okay.
was the resident musician for the Banyan Tree Art Fairs. As you may know, the Banyan Tree and everywhere I lived and worked in Lahaina is now gone.
Yeah. Yeah. That is just too bad.
Yeah,
It's
terrible,
it's a
terrible
beautiful place.
tragedy.
Yeah, it will be again.
I hope
It'll be
so.
beautiful again. Yeah, I have no doubt. There's too much money to be made for it not to be.
Well, you're right about that.
So Corey, what are you going to play for us?
Well, it's funny because had I known I do play guitar, so I could have grabbed
Okay,
the guitar and played. But I didn't realize we could bring an instrument. So now that I know, next time I'll bring my guitar.
absolutely.
Yay!
Yeah, yeah. The show actually started out as a music interview show,
Oh,
and
really?
for my Wednesday night network as part of kind of an extension of my Wednesday night networking group, which was originally envisioned as a way for musicians and business owners to network. And
Oh, very cool.
yeah, it's called MNO, which I can't mention enough because they promote this show all over the place.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so Corey, what got you into speaking in the first place? What inspired you?
Well, I don't know if I'll call it inspired as much as I'll say I got tricked into it, but I got tricked into performing stand-up comedy one night.
Okay.
And the the tricking part, because some people are like, how do you get tricked? But the guy that got us to promote it didn't tell us that we were going to be the comics that night. So we worked our butt off to fill the place. And then we got informed 5 minutes before showtime that we were the comics. And so I didn't have any material. 8 people walked out the front door. I stayed. And basically I kept going back week after week, and then along the way, somebody invited me to a Tony Robbins event, and they told me he was getting paid to do it, and I'm like, I want to know how he does that, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
kind of what pushed me down the path.
Okay. Okay. So, is that kind of a route you would recommend to people, or is there a better way to get into speaking than getting tricked into it?
Well, I definitely think there's a better way than doing stand-up comedy. I don't think that's for everybody. They say the number one fear in the world above death is public speaking. I would argue that
Mm-hmm.
comedy's bigger than public speaking. The fear of doing stand-up is bigger. The reason they don't say it's number one is because so few people will ever even try it. So I don't recommend you start out doing stand-up comedy. I recommend either A, you launch into speaking on your own and try to figure it out as you go, or B, you work with somebody, whether it's myself or somebody else, that helps people learn how to do that. Because there's a way, like, I learned all the stuff in the trenches. I didn't have mentors, and I wouldn't recommend that for my for my greatest enemy, but you can do it that way. It's just that you end up falling on your face a bit more than you would have to. If somebody I always say, if somebody could point out the manholes so you don't have to fall down them, why would you want to fall down the same manholes I've already fallen down?
Right.
But I
Agreed.
That
don't
makes
think
a lot of
stand-up
sense.
comedy is the best path to going into speaking. I really don't.
Yeah, because that kind of ties in with the fear of death. Um, because you try to do stand up comedy, there's a pretty good chance you're going to die.
Definitely,
My
like
wa-
we call it on the stage, dying. Like dying meaning you don't get any
Yeah.
laughs. That happens every night somewhere in the world.
Yep, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I used to think I was going to be an actor, and of course, when you want to wish someone well as an actor, you tell them to break a leg, and I've been told more than once to go out and die. Um, wow, they really wish me well.
I don't think I've been told that one yet.
Yeah. Oh, but yeah, theater can be live theater can be a bitch.
Yeah, I did a little bit. I had how I get into comedy actually is I put two stage plays in a fringe festival back to back years, and that's a really tough racket. Like going out, I wrote the stuff, and the first year I didn't want to be on the stage, so I got these actors to do it. The second year I wrote a two-man play, and I was on the stage the whole time. And yeah, it's a tough business.
wow.
Yeah,
I went to a
But
yeah.
comedy show on Father's Day. My wife took me to a show here in town. We don't get very many stand-up comedians, and there were two of them. I laughed so hard my face hurt, and I was really inspired. So I started looking. Is there an open mic? Maybe I'll go try this, for 5 minutes. But I don't know. After hearing you, Corey, maybe not.
You know what I say it, I mean, this is the way I look at it. It's worth trying once in your life, and in fact, the reason I say I got tricked into it, but the reason I did it that night is because I didn't want to live with the regret that I hadn't tried it. This was the chance.
Oh.
Like, we had the show built, we promoted it, and by the way, the story doesn't end well for me. Basically, 15 people showed up that night, 8 walked out the front door. I tried to find an exit window, which I couldn't find, so I decided to stay. And I get up on the stage, told 2 jokes, only to find out that I didn't even turn the mic on and nobody heard the
Ooh.
jokes.
Oh.
And that's my first time, so why would I go back? But we got the mic turned on. People used to ask me, "What happened after you got the mic turned on?" Well, I told the jokes again, and guess what? They still bombed. So I think I'm the only comedian to bomb
No.
with the same material twice in 10 minutes.
Oh.
That
So
is
that's a fun.
awesome. Yeah, you should have left well enough alone. No,
I
I'm
probably should have.
kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah, yeah. I don't know if I could do stand-up comedy, but yeah, I definitely don't think I'd want to do 5 minutes worth of material because I've tried writing 5 minute speeches before, and it's really hard. It's so much easier to write for an hour. You know?
It actually is, because you try to figure out how can I get a real message out in 5 minutes. And what happens, I think, for a lot of us, Bill, is that we try to put too much into the 5 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't know what can I subtract out and still have it all make sense. And so you really have to focus on only one main takeaway if you only have 5 minutes, and it's hard to do that.
Yeah,
It really is.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And yeah, getting to the efficiency of words is is a difficult thing. I'm in grad school, so I'm learning every day how to take more and more words out of my writing. Of course, each class I take, they want me to write something longer, but it's still got to be include more stuff. So it's like, oh yes, today you get to write 3,000 words, but it's got to sound like it's 5,000.
Yeah, that's also a science, right? To know what to leave in and what to take out. And
Mm-hmm.
when I start writing articles, I learned the hard way that it's hard to do it, but it's what I found is I used to have to do that. Like, what can I take out and everything still makes sense and work? And here's the thing I found fascinating is I fought it and didn't want to do it, but once I finally did it, it actually was better. Like, it was a better article, a better
Mm.
story when I took the words
Yeah,
out, but I didn't want to do it.
yeah. Those superfluous words do tend to muddy the waters, if you will. So
When I started writing my book, I wrote it once, and it was just like too big. And then a friend of mine recommended a book by Stephen King. It's called A Memoir of the Craft on Writing. I read that book 3 times, and I followed that, and all of a sudden just went, taking out all of this stuff, and it was much, much better.
yeah,
Yeah,
I've done quite a bit of editing over the course of my some odd careers, and but this is the first time I'm writing, and I'm actually writing the book. So yeah, it's not as easy.
Well, just
that's
stick
a
with
great
it.
book, by the way. Oh,
For sure.
yeah, that Stephen King book's a great book, by the way.
Yeah, I read it 3 times, and every time I found something new in there, and I go, well, yeah, let's try that. And whoa, I just went in there and sliced and slashed just like one of his villains, and it came out a lot better. But he had
That's
quite
awesome.
an interesting life. Boy, I tell you, that car accident almost took him out of the game.
But
You
instead,
want
it
to hear
gave him a
another?
book.
You want to hear another song on the stick?
Sure.
Okay.
It's really cool. I'm really liking the sound of that. That's yeah. It's I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like a couple of guitars playing at once.
Well, one of it's probably one of the most expressive, most versatile instruments ever devised. It has an electric pickup, a just simple magnetic pickup, like a
Okay.
ordinary electric guitar. The strings are very close to the frets, and it's wired in stereo, so you could put it to 2 amps. And it's electric, so you could use any effect pedal ever made for guitar, bass, or keyboards. Uh, at one time, Emmett also developed a MIDI pickup that could be put under the
Oh.
strings, and he worked with the engineers at Roland and he was able to get it to interface with Roland guitar synthesizers. I use that setup when
Nice.
I'm recording, and it makes it sound enormous. You'll listen to the headphones and you hear all this stuff happening in the background. I don't want to cover up the sound of the stick because I think it sounds pretty good just the way it is. But you hear all this other
Right.
stuff happening. And this is all done in real time. I did a number of albums of just all original music, and every single one of them was literally a one-take song. Of course, I edited and mixed and all that good stuff to make it sound good, but you could do all of those parts without ever overdubbing. And it sounds great.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Very versatile.
Sounds like it. What got you started into music? Then you said you played the trumpet back before I think you said trumpet.
Yeah.
Back
In the
before
fifth
playing the stick.
grade, back when I went to elementary school, you could take an elective course. I chose music. My mom said, "What do you want to play?" I go, "The drums." And she goes, "Absolutely not. Anything but
Absolutely
drums."
not.
So I ended up with the trumpet. And of course, they weren't about to go buy one. You rent it first and see if he
Right.
stays with it. And I played for 10 years. After high school, I worked in a music store in Southern California for 1 year. One day I'm in the back room and I'm sitting there looking through a trade mag and I see this tiny little advertisement. It says, "Tap softly, but carry a big orchestra." And this is 1976. There's no internet. So I said, "Oh, yeah, I'll write for information." You lick a stamp and mail a letter. And a few weeks later, I get something from the Chapmans who lived in Los Angeles. And there was no brochure at the time. All they had was this poorly photocopied article someone had written. And I was just fascinated with it. A few months later, Emmett was the opening act for a group at, it was a place called the Barn Coffee House. Every college has got one. By morning, it's coffee
Right.
and croissants, and by night, it's, beer and music. And I went and I was just sitting in the front row and I watched Chapman, and I just sat there with my mouth hanging open the whole time. It was unbelievable. And I met him after the show and we went out back and we talked and he was showing me how to do it. And I was hooked. And about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months later, my dad gave me the money to buy an instrument, which at that time was $600. Well, $600 in 1976, you could probably buy 3 used cars. So it was quite the investment. And when I finally got it, I figured, well, I better learn how to play it. And so
Yeah.
that's how it all started. And I think Emmett also had an ulterior motive. It was generally thought at that time that he was the only person that could play it. And he was demonstrating at trade shows, which meant he was on the whole time. So as I got good enough to play a few simple songs, I'd help him at trade shows so he could take breaks. And I don't think I sounded very good, but at the time the instrument was still so new, it got a lot of attention. And we went to trade shows. We went to the US Festival twice, and it was incredible. There was the guy that had just invented the electronic drums, a guy named Simmons. You remember in the 80s, those hexagonal drums? All the new wave
Mm-hmm.
bands had one. And then there was a fella named
Yeah.
Niall Steiner, and he had invented this thing called the electronic wind instrument. He was a trumpet player, and what he did was he invented it interfaced with synthesizers so he could play it like a trumpet. He later sold that to Yamaha, and they turned it into the electronic saxophone called the Lyricon. And so here's the 3 inventors all jamming in these technology tents in the mid 80s at the US Festival on the instruments they invented. And I'm standing there just going, I am in the presence of giants. That's what I'm thinking. I go, it couldn't get any better than this. I turned and looked to my left, and who was standing next to me? Robert Moog, the inventor of the synthesizer. And so we started
Wow.
chatting. I mean, I had so many experiences like that. Well, through Emmett. And back when the stick was, no one had ever even heard of it, and it's still pretty much the case today. There have been a few progressive type rock bands like King Crimson. Peter Gabriel has used the stick in his recordings, and even right
Okay.
now, Carl Palmer, the only surviving member of ELP, is
Mm-hmm.
touring, and he has a stick player as part of his three-piece that
Wow.
does all of Keith Emerson's parts. So
Huh.
just an incredibly versatile instrument, just best instrument no one's ever heard of.
That's something else. Um, so yeah. Well, Corey, what would be your one bit of advice for Michael to get into speaking about the stick and making the most out of his book?
Well, I mean, there's honestly so many there's so many pieces, so many directions you can go when it comes to speaking and getting your message out. What I would say is, I mean, there's a couple things. First, I would say figure out what the end goal is, meaning, if you went into, let's say, a corporate audience to do a talk, it probably wouldn't fit as well as if you went into, let's say, a public event, where it's like a public event, let's say, it could be built around health or arts or things like that. So the first things I would figure out where you want to get the message out. I mean, you mentioned TED Talk. I think if you could do a TED Talk that really gave some great, like if there's a way to share the message about what we can learn, let's say, from the instrument, or if you could make it a unique talk about that instrument, I think if the TEDx talk picked up and went far, that could be a great legacy talk to share the message. The last TEDx event that I spoke at, there was a girl that she had a background in orchestra. And what she did was she talked about orchestra, about how each member was like a member of your team at your office. And she related all the orchestra instruments to the different members of your team, and how, as a conductor, you're the leader of the company, the CEO, you have to keep all of those running if you want a smooth sounding company. And so it was like a metaphor from the orchestra to the way a company operates. And I thought it was brilliant. And, if that catches on, it's going to introduce a lot of people to how an orchestra works, because she went through every step of each instrument and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you get a powerful TED talk out there, if you could get on some big podcasts where they're open to different type of topics, I mean, yeah, I think to me that's the kind of first starting point. But also, like I said, if you're speaking at events, try to speak at ones where you'll have the most impact. Because again, if you go speak at corporate office, uh, you might be there and there might be only like 5% of the people even are interested in music. You know what I mean? So I think you want to go to people that already love music. So those would be quick tips. I mean, there's so many directions I could go with that question, but those are quick ones that popped in the top of my head.
Thank you very
I
much. I
figured we'd
appreciate
give.
it. I'm trying to keep
Yeah,
the music at a minimum because the stick is just a physical manifestation of creativity, innovation, and problem solving. And that's kind of the direction I'm going. I don't want to get up there and be a musician. I've done that for over 45 years. I've had over 30 releases, and it'd be kind of fun to do something different for a change. Thank you very much, Corey. I really appreciate your advice.
oh yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see it maybe relating to something like a mental health kind of a vibe to it of hey, get your mind right, and this is how it works with your brain, and those kinds of things. But yeah, that'd be pretty awesome. I'd watch it.
Well,
I would
thank
Well,
too.
you.
hey.
On the mental health,
Huh?
I saw. I've seen several episodes of your podcast, but one that was really stuck with me was the woman was named Amanda, and she had written a book about how
Amanda
she
Quick.
was Amanda Quick. Wow, that was powerful. And then you guys kind of
Yeah.
both opened up about mental health, and it was it was nice to see that kind of vulnerability. I mean, we all want to portray ourselves as powerful and strong, and we never make a mistake, but it just doesn't. It doesn't end up that way in real life, and it was a powerful podcast, and especially her story, amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Amanda's story is awesome. If anybody listening or watching right now, if you haven't caught my interview with Amanda Quick, just scroll down the page until you find it, and it's well worth the listen. So I highly recommend it. She's she's done a TED Talk, but it hasn't been. I guess it hasn't been published yet, or however it is they released. Yeah, it hasn't been released yet. I guess
two more books that I'm going to have to get: The Enlightened Passenger and Amanda's book, because you're welcome.
Yeah, The Sex Trafficker's Wife.
Wow! Wow! What a story.
Yeah. It was. Yeah, that was something else. But anyway, we've done like 50 minutes of this, and always want to keep them wanting more. So before we go, like to ask, do you gentlemen have any final words for the nice people? Corey, let's start with you.
I would just say that, you can tell Michael is living his passion, and you can tell you are as well, Bill. And I would just say that, in my experience, if you want a fulfilling life, you need to find a passion or multiple passions and then figure out a way to live on purpose. That would kind of be my takeaway. That's what changed everything in my life and for me.
Awesome.
And my final words are, everything takes longer and costs more than you ever thought in the beginning, but just stick with it.
If it costs nothing else, it costs you time.
There you go.
And that's the one thing you can't get back, no matter how hard you try.
And
so, gentlemen, I would like to thank. Yep, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to, and all of my mentors in the past always said the same thing: the best investment you can ever make is in yourself, because they could take everything away from you, but what you got up here is yours forever.
Yep. Hopefully. You could lose your marbles. I might.
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, thank you both for being on the show. I'd love to have you each on again, because every time the show's different, because it's always two different people. So that's one of the things I like about the format. But so anyway, everyone be safe out there. Be sure to wash your hands and stay tuned for the ending credits. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been a presentation of Bald Spots Productions. I'd like to thank our producer, my beloved mother, Eileen Hatch. I'd especially like to thank our associate producer, Paul Hernandez III, for his contribution to the shows this month. Follow his financial channel, HDZ Financial, on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram to stay on top of the latest financial news and improve your financial literacy. I, of course, am your humble host. I'd also like to thank my special guests, Corey Poirier and Michael Kollwitz. Support the show if you feel so led over on patreon.com. We're known as Bald Spots Pro. Don't you dare miss YWL Online. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever fine podcasts are offered. Be sure to tune in next time when my special guest will be Tavares Garrett. Tavares is the creator and author of The Body Synthesis. He gives out energy in so many ways. I just can't wait to learn what's got him so up. I could use a bit of that juice. Be sure to like, comment, and share. Subscribe, follow, whatever it is you've got to do to kick that algorithm into gear and help us reach more people. If you or someone you know needs support now, call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org. That is the suicide and crisis lifeline here in the United States.